Wichita after midnight sounds like a refrigerator trying not to wake anyone. Swamp coolers exhale, trains practice being ghosts somewhere beyond the river, and every porch light believes it is a small police department. I had come home late from closing the copy center, hands paper cut and glue sticky, smelling like toner and the broken spines of resumes. My duplex sat between a church that kept vigil whether anybody asked it to or not, and a ranch house with a gable that looked like a shrug. I fed my cat, twisted the Venetian blinds shut, and let the TV talk me into not feeling alone. When the knock came, it had the polite rhythm of a salesman who knows the difference between persistence and a sin. "Code enforcement," a voice said from the other side of the door, cheerful, neighborly, Midwestern, and slid a card under the weather strip with 2 careful fingers. "Sorry for the hour. Had a complaint about trash cans and setback, ma'am. Won't take a minute." The card was white with a tiny municipal seal I recognized because it lives on everybody's water bill. It read Neighborhood Compliance, City of Park City in a font that trusted itself. Beneath, a name, R, and a last name I didn't keep. The R did most of the job. There was a phone number. It was local. In the top left corner, a tiny punch where the lamination had failed revealed paper like a throat. I put my eye to the peephole and saw a man in a windbreaker, the color of instructions, a clipboard, a belt that kept its promises. Average height, neither thin nor heavy but committed, hair parted with an old-fashioned confidence and combed like it was on time. His smile stood at attention without being eager. There was a badge clipped where a badge should be clipped, and the clipboard had a form with boxes that explain the world to men like him. "I can come back during normal," he said gently when I didn't answer at once. "The neighbor said dogs had got into the trash. I don't write the ordinance. I just keep peace. You notice I'm not banging? That's because we don't bang in Kansas." He laughed softly at his own joke and let the silence demonstrate how reasonable he could be. My cat pushed her head against my shin in case I had mistaken her for someone who felt less than brave. I opened the door the way women do when they do not want to open doors. Chain engaged, hip braced, mouth already practicing no. "Evening," I said. "It's late for cans." "You'd be surprised how angry people get about lids," he said, a bland delight. "And it's never about lids. It's about order." He slid his card up to the chain the way you slide $1 into a church plate. "May I verify your name? Then I can check a box and stop being a nuisance." "It's on the mailbox," I said, and he turned to look with a degree of courtesy that made me not hate him. He wrote something on his form and slid the tip of his pen into the signature line with a kind of pageantry. Men with clipboards are always about to teach you the way the calendar works. "You're in compliance," he said with satisfaction, as if I should be proud of my nature. "But you know how neighbors are. The gentleman next door thinks your cans live too far forward. I told him, 'Sir, if you want to get Bible about it, love your neighbor means love their cans too.'" He gave me the smile of a man who practices charm the way other men practice knots. "Can I step 2 feet in and leave you a copy? Wind's picking up." It wasn't. Kansas wind announces itself like a parade, but he said picking up so politely that the air agreed. The chain stayed. I slid 2 inches of door and took the paper from him because refusal would have turned courtesy into conflict. And conflict at the door is the only flavor of stranger danger my body doesn't metabolize well. The page was pre-printed boxes about Yard and Refuse Ordinance 8.112 and a cartoon of a trash can wearing a smile like it had been drawn by an optimist. "Sorry," he said again, a Kansas reflex like offering water and using your blinker. "Saw your porch light flicker when I was walking the block. You want me to look? If it's loose at the fixture, you'll get bugs sneaking in all summer." "I'll get my landlord," I said. "Smart," he approved. Too many folks try to fix things they shouldn't. I see it in my line all the time. People call it freedom when what they mean is, "I don't like being told." He tapped his clipboard with 2 fingers just once, a tiny percussion. "You safe in there?" he asked, not prying, checking boxes. "Yes," I said, because the script told me to. "Good," he said. "I like it when ladies are careful. Men who say ladies sometimes mean compliant." He tipped his head in a small bow and turned to go, plant foot pivot, like he had practiced it on church steps. Then he paused, half back, the way a man does when he's remembered he is supposed to be helpful. "Ma'am?" He pointed at the deadbolt. Your keyhole's smiling at anybody who wants to read it. See the brass scuff? Key's been forced. Might just be wear. But I can look close if you're comfortable. Hate for somebody to have mischief on their mind and find your house in the kind of mood to allow it. I looked. The plate did show the kind of polishing that happens when you live alone and practice arriving. And that is how he stepped 2 feet in, with me pointing and him already leaning. Courtesy is a tidal current at the threshold. It pulls. He did not touch me. He glanced with professional care and made a little that did not threaten. You got a second chain? He asked. I like to see 2 points of decision. Thieves hate extra choices. I have one, I said. Chain and deadbolt. Upgrade if you can, he said, stepping back exactly the right number of inches so I would not think he wanted more. You have a good night. He took his weight off my porch as if the wood had thanked him. He walked toward the sidewalk with a gait that told the world he belonged to the part of it that writes tickets for leaving campers on the street in winter. I shut the door, slid the chain, locked the bolt, and felt that tiny, humiliating deflation polite men teach you. See? Not everyone with a badge-sized piece of plastic wants to eat you. The TV said something stupid. My cat, Shirley, returned to the business of existing without worry. I poured myself water because water is a ritual that pretends to clean more than it does. When the power went out, it was neat. Not a clumsy blackout, not a storm. Just a small, practiced click that pulled the room into the kind of darkness you can iron. I said no. Not because of fear, but because I recognized a sentence that had been rehearsed. My phone, on the kitchen counter, hummed at me with its dying screen. The outside streetlight stayed on. My duplex's other half, Miss Elkins, asleep since bingo, glowed behind her curtains with the blue that tells you a TV has decided to be your roommate. My clock went dead, my microwave and my lamp and my fan. The house went quiet and waited to see whether I would try to narrate it into something ordinary. The knock returned. Softer. 3 syllables. I am back. Breaker, the voice said, cheerful, apologetic. I'm sorry, ma'am, it's me again. When I left, I saw your meter spark. It's not safe. If a junction blows, you'll get smoke. You want me to show you where your panel is? I'll stay at the bottom of the stairs. You can recognize a wolf by how often he says sorry. You can also recognize a lifetime of female education by how hard it is to refuse a man who says spark. The flashlight under my door cut a thin white line like a rule laid down in chalk. I'm fine, I called. I'll call maintenance. At midnight? He said, not mocking, merely realistic. Park City doesn't pick up after 10, and you'll get a man who cites the script, not the wires. I have gloves in the truck. Let me point. You do the touching. I won't even come inside. You won't like the smell of burned insulation if you wait. I stayed gut still for 3 breaths. Which is the medium-sized bravery that saves nobody, but buys a moment. Then, because I am not a saint but a person, I slid the chain. When I opened the door, he had the flashlight beam aimed at the floor by his own boots, exactly where a considerate man aims light so you don't accuse him of using it to see you naked. His face was a study in apology plus calm. He held up an orange pair of electrician's gloves like church palms. I don't touch, he said lightly. I just point. He pointed. He remained outside while my body rehearsed gratitude for something I'd not yet been given. I stepped into the short hallway to the breaker closet. I opened it and looked with spectacle, and then did the thing every Kansan does when technology fails. I flipped every switch because flipping them is a belief we have agreed is prayer. The house held its breath. What happened next would sound like magic, if magic had a union. The door behind me swung, and the chain didn't catch because I had been the one who slid it. The flashlight rose, and the man with the clipboard, who by now had a second card he put back in his pocket, like an actor who only uses props until the scene is set, stepped across the threshold with a neatness that made the wood grateful to have been chosen. He closed the door with 2 fingers and let the lock learn obedience. He smiled, the smile of a man who is going to show you the correct way to coil a garden hose. Okay, he said, as if this were a meeting we both had RSVP'd to. We're going to be polite. He said polite like a contract. He did not raise his voice. He did not wave a weapon. He did not smell like anger. He looked at my hands first, as if he were measuring them for a task, and then at the hallway where the carpet makes most women apologize in their own houses. "I don't want to hurt you," he said. "And men who say that often mean I want to keep the mess to the minimum I've budgeted for." "I'm going to scream," I said. It was a sentence and a prayer. He gave me a small sympathetic wince. "It won't go far," he said. And as he said it, the compressor on my neighbor's ancient refrigerator coughed on again. The TV next door laughed at a joke about a doctor in a bar, and the street outside, a good street with Lutheran signage, kept believing the world was immaculate. He had killed only half my power, the half that made me think I was alone, and left the rest to witness against me. "My cat," I said, which was the wrong saint to bring into it. He turned the flashlight away from the hallway, and the black of my living room made the word cat feel like a little flag hung on a bomb. "Animals don't get this," he said, sighing with genuine pity. "I know! I've put down dogs because their people won't learn rules." He looked into the dark of my house the way men look into ponds they intend to measure. "We'll keep this tidy." "Tidy is not the same as safe," I said, surprising myself with how fast native Kansans can find a sentence like that in the pantry. "That's a sermon," he said, amused. "I'm a deacon, not a preacher." He held up his empty hand to show me it was a hand. From his belt, not a holster, but a pocket that liked to pretend it was one, he drew a length of white cotton cord coiled like a good idea. It wasn't theater. It was inventory. He set it on the floor, neat as a prayer, next to my own feet, the way men set towels by pools. "Sit," he said, "on the step. Hands in your lap so you don't get any ideas. Breathe." "Why?" I said. "Because we'll both do better if you practice listening," he said pleasantly. He crouched, not within reach, hands on his knees like a little league coach crouching to teach a boy how to hold a bat. "Names make people talk too much. I don't want to hear yours. I won't give you mine. If you're smart, you'll keep your mouth from doing anything but breathing. If you're smart, you'll come out of this with only a story to tell people you think deserve it. Don't make me change the way I planned this." "You planned this," I repeated, as if that could shame him into smaller footprints. "Order takes planning," he said. "Chaos happens on its own." He let the flashlight lie so that it made a little stage of the space between my knees and his shoes. He uncoiled a foot of cord with an affection men reserve for instruments and machines. "Wrists," he said, and the word was an invitation to a ceremony I did not wish to attend. I did the dumb, brave thing that once saved me from a door-to-door donation pitch. I laughed. Quiet. Disbelieving. "Do you hear yourself?" I asked. "You came into my house to teach me manners?" He smiled at that. Genuinely. Not the way a man smiles at a woman who thinks she is funny in front of his friends. "I knew you'd be difficult," he said, with a tenderness that made my chest burn. "I watch. I choose. I don't like messy girls who'll make me finish something I didn't start. I like clean girls who understand steps." He nodded toward the cord. "We're at step 1. My mouth wanted to say 100 things. God is watching. My neighbor is awake. You will not win me. My body wanted me to keep it. I looked down at my hands and pretended they belonged to somebody who could read ropes like scripture. My father taught me to tie a bowline on the Neo show when he was still alive. He taught me that a knot you know the name for will tell you where it wants to be undone. I placed my wrists together and then overlapped them by exactly the 4 fingers his kind like because it looks like compliance. It is also how you save an inch of slack that some men think is mercy and some men forget is a hole. He noticed. He noticed everything. He paid attention. This was his huge sin. "You've tied before," he said, pleased. "My father," I lied. He nodded as if we had just agreed that fathers make girls worth keeping and letting go. The first loop was like hands clapping. The second bit the first. The third went backward for show and forward for function. He tied it like a man who has made a study of photographs. He tied it like prayer rattled through a meat grinder. He tied it so the knot lived on the go-to side of my right palm, where I could not get teeth to it. He tied it so the cord spoke to me in the language of obedience, and then, very cleverly, he ran the tail back through the binding and created a Spanish windlass, a small turn that decides whether you can breathe in your hands. "Not too tight," he said, and didn't make it 1 notch looser. "That's step 1. What's step 2? I asked, so he would have to say it and hear his own mouth. Feet, he said. He glanced down the hall as if measuring whether my house had learned to be ashamed of itself yet. Then we talk. He let me set my own ankles together, because letting a person do something herself keeps certain kinds of men from seeing themselves the way a court will. He cinched but didn't yank. He reached into his jacket and produced something that made my heart throw itself against my ribs, for a different reason than fear. It was a little spiral notebook, police blue, with projects typed on the cover in the kind of typewriter font that invites defense attorneys to squint at it later. He did not let me see the first page. He turned to a page in the middle where there were bullet points and little boxes and a word that looked like my street misspelled to make himself feel separate from it. The beam drifted. My cat, Sweet, incurious, walked through it and sneezed because light is just dust you can see. Please, I said, and the please surprised me by meaning my cat as much as me. Animals, he murmured again. The pity in his voice was sincere in the way a drawstring bag is sincerely a bag. They don't understand projects. He set the notebook down on the step beside his knee and pulled from his pocket a pair of white gloves. He put them on with attention that made me realize he'd watched surgeons on TV when he was practicing being a man who doesn't blink. The gloves were new. He did not intend to get anything on them. That was his religion. You're going to tell me about your week, he said conversationally, as if we were beginning an exit interview. Monday through now, comings and goings, times, people. I already know some, but I like to hear it from the mouth. While you talk, I decide. Decide what? How neat we get to be, he said. So I talked the way a person builds a ladder patch by patch. I told him about opening shifts and the copier that thinks it is a personality. I told him about the paper that jams because men buy the wrong kind because they hate asking. I told him about my landlord's truck and his Wednesday routine. I told him I go running at dawn on Saturdays, even though I do not. I told him there's a kid across the street who takes a school bus at 7:05, and if you stand near the church sign at the right angle, you can be videotaped by a camera the pastor boasts about at potlucks. He wrote. He asked the kind of follow-up questions that make interviews look thorough, when what they are is practice for controlling the next hour. Do you lock the back gate? He asked. Yes. How many keys? He asked. Your landlord keep one? Boyfriend? People always say no because they don't want to give me an audience. Later, we find a key in a shoebox and it becomes a sermon about why women shouldn't apologize for preparing. No boyfriend, I said. He paused there to let the grammar he loves bloom. No husband, he corrected. And the correction was not necessary to the narrative, but essential to his story about himself. He asked if I knew any policemen. I said I didn't, and made my voice behave like that was not a failure. He asked if anyone would come looking tonight. I said my mother calls in the morning. A lie is a tradition you owe your mother, even if you haven't given her grandchildren. He nodded and wrote and shifted his weight like a man who knows how to kneel for longer than a prayer. I watched his notebook. Projects. He had written my address as if it were a word you can take the vowels out of and make it mean more to you than to anyone else. He'd put a little box around the church name. He'd written garage with a question mark. The page before had casseroles of names thrown together with dates. On the edge of the paper, a little cartoon of a loop. He had a hobby horse. Knots teach him to spell. You know, I said, gentle, friendly, Sister Sunday School voice I hadn't used since I got old enough to drink. This is the stupidest thing you ever did. He was in a good mood now, the way men get cheerful once the ankle knots reassure them they will be listened to. You came to my house when the church across the street has a camera, I said. You let your face be baptized by a motion sensor. You spoke to me with the porch light on. You used Park City when I live in Wichita. I tried to smile the way polite women smile when they are informing you softly that you mispronounced the name of their cousin at Thanksgiving. That badge you flashed has the old seal. The city changed the serif last year. I don't know why I knew that. I might have been making it up. My mouth was running a con on my fear. What's your point? He asked, and it was the first crack in the soup plate. You prefer order, I said, nodding at his project Bible. But you got sloppy because you liked showing up with your rules. You wanted me to tell you I'm a girl who keeps schedule. It made you excited. You're not here for me. You're here for your own neat. That's your weakness. Men like him always tilt when you say weakness in a melodic voice. His smile thinned until it had corners you could cut yourself on. "We have time," he said softly. "I took some from you when I cut the right wire." He tilted his head toward the back hall like a man admiring a fence he'd recently straightened. Polite girls gift men time without knowing they're giving it. "I'm not polite," I said. "You are," he murmured, making "are" the kind of gospel men like him sing in their heads. He put his hand out, open, casual, and took back the slack in my wrist rope by the windlass until my palms rediscovered their blood. He watched me watch the rope bite. He studied my face for complaint he could consider messy. I gave him none. Pain and politeness are cousins. Both can be disguised as virtue. "Step 3, he said without looking at the page. "Mouth." He gestured toward the little roll of medical tape he had in his pocket. "This will be neat if you are neat." He said it like a promise. "I'm going to throw up," I said. And there it was. Grossness, the one lever that makes tidy men briefly consider God. He leaned back a fraction of an inch, mouth remembering a straight line. "You can go in the bathroom," he decided, magnanimous. He rose, directing the flashlight down the hallway to the open door with the medicine cabinet mirror that always makes you look like unfinished homework. "I'll be standing right outside. No funny business." I did my best to rise with rope on my ankles. I used the wall like a badly trained friend. He did not touch me. It was not chivalry, self-protection. He hates hair and skin and DNA the way a nun hates whistling in church. He guided with light, and the word there spoken softly as if to a dog he wants to impress the neighbors with. In the bathroom, the window above the tub is a rectangle of Plymouth ice glass, the kind nobody can see through but everybody knows what's on the other side of. The latch on it sticks unless you push in with your thumb while you lift with your palm. You learn that in August, when the shower refuses to let steam leave and you decide to make your own exit. "I'm going to be sick," I said again, and added that low moan women use when they want a man to leave them alone with their own body. He stood just left of the jam, where I could not see his face but could feel his listening. Men like him are always listening. They are not good at hearing. I leaned over the sink and made the sound the body makes when a night has come into it and refuses to find the door politely. It is not elegant, that sound. It is something the world gave us so strangers will back up without being able to say why. He did back up 2 inches, the way a man worried about shoes backs up. I took that inch like it was an heirloom. I spat water. I let my shoulders shake the way shoulders do the day after the flu. I said his false name out loud and asked for a towel. He did not move to help. He has rules. He will only touch towels he brought. I made a show of adjusting my weight and let my left hip bang the sink cabinet so that the mirror rattled like a speaking instrument. He doesn't like noise. It ruins his neat. He said careful as if we were in a china shop. I pressed my cuffed hands under my thigh and used the porcelain to wedge the windlass just a 1/4 inch. Not a rescue. Just a reminder that an inch is a country. I hooked my fingers under the hem of the shower curtain and pinched its plastic until it made a sound like someone's patience ending. I gagged again convincingly. He said enough, not unkind. I used the palm of my right hand to press the latch of the window while my left, miracle, found purchase in the slack I had lied into existence by overlapping my wrists at the start. The window popped with a small domestic paw. The air that came in smelled like the cheap honeysuckle my landlord had planted to hide a fence that doesn't do the job. His flashlight beam slid 2 inches as if to look. Then he corrected it, because he is a man who hates improvisation. "You open that, you'll get bugs," he said. "I'm going to pass out," I said, because there is a certain kind of man to whom fainting is either an insult or a gift, never something they planned for. He stepped forward just enough to violate his own rule about touching. The flashlight went toward my face. The tape was ready in his left hand. I turned. I snapped the window wider with the back of my skull so that it made drama without making violence. I threw my shoulder into him. Not the way self-defense classes teach. the way a clumsy person does by accident all day, and he made a noise of offended balance. His elbow hit the door frame with a hollow thunk, and the flashlight went hard down the hall, strobing light into the living room, where the cat sat dignified on the arm of the couch, like a bored judge. I wedged my shoulder into the hinge side of the bathroom door and pushed it closed with my back. He put his palm against it immediately with, of course, the strength his kind always have because they have learned to only use it on wood and women. The door and I had 3 seconds where we were both people. "Don't," he said, and I did. I ground my heel into the tile and shoved. He shoved back, annoyed. I let my own knees give way and slid to the floor fast. So fast his palm, still forward on the wood, suddenly faced above the door where no man belongs. The top of him followed because bodies do. I spun my ankle rope over my feet and kicked, not at his face, not at his stomach, at his knee, where the ligaments live like people who will testify against you if you give them a chance. He cursed in a way that told me he saves actual curse words for when he is surprised. The door gave me an inch. I took it. I let me wedge my shoulder into the bottom corner and push again. The tape fell on the bath mat, a miracle in beige. I grabbed it with 2 fingers, like a woman fishing pennies out of a fountain she doesn't believe in. I slapped it against the latch on the window so it would not rattle and give away the fact that I planned to be more air than girl in a minute. He shoved hard once, hard enough to remind me that my plan depended on him liking carpets more than me. He did shove. I let go. My body went backward into the tub, in a collapse that made my teeth clap and my breath ask for HR. He burst through the door with his neatness knit back together and the kind of glare a gentleman pretends he doesn't have in front of company. He stepped toward the tub, wrist flicking to make the tape be a law. I made a noise so loud it had no register. It startled him because sometimes in Kansas the loudest thing in the night is the wind, and the wind had been polite thus far. "Let's be neat," he said, run ragged for the first time. "No," I said, less a word than a piece of machinery I had decided to pick up. He reached. I reached for the shower rod. Cheap chrome gives itself to people who are willing to be ugly. It snapped out of its mounts with the kind of graceful surrender that makes you trust it too much. He laughed once, one syllable, at the idea that I thought it would be a weapon. But I didn't need weapon. I needed distance. I flung the rod, not at him, but past him, through the bathroom door where it clattered along tile like a this-way sign. He turned his head, only a little. You couldn't ask for less. I slid under his reaching arm like a motel Bible and was in the hallway with my hip bruising into the world again. I ran idiot, ankles kissing, hands a single animal, body learning geometry it will never put on a college application. He came after me without noise, but with purpose. I hit the front door and did the ugly work of a person who has watched 1,000 movies and learned nothing. I tried to pull a locked thing open. It did not. He was there at my shoulder again with no breath out of place, and his hand touched the back of my neck. Not violent, paternal, unforgivable. "Stop," he said. The porch light clicked on. Not my porch light. The neighbor's Miss Elkins, who might yet inherit the kingdom for such moments. She did not open her door. She just made her house see. The church sign did us the loving favor of announcing, "Welcome, God sees you every 6 seconds in LEDs haunted by budget." He froze, exactly the size any man would freeze if he were an usher who had just been discovered backstage without his jacket. His hand did not leave my neck. It didn't need to for me to see I had become heavier in it. He made a calculation so fast it smelled like lightning. "Step back," he said, and the please wasn't there on purpose. "No," I said, because no becomes an instrument after a certain hour. He did a thing neat men do when the paper tears incorrectly. He chose the smaller rip. He put his palm flat on the door, twisted the lock back to the correct geometry, and opened it. He walked me 2 feet onto my porch into the light like a date he was steady about. He lifted his other hand from his belt. It held nothing. He showed his empty palm to the church. He smiled at the street like he had been instructed to be neighborly in an ordinance he wrote. He made me a polite shield without ever letting me be free. "Quit it," Miss Elkins said from inside her house, God bless her bones, and banged something against her wall with a wooden spoon the way farm wives threaten tornadoes. I called the police, she lied, lyric as a psalm. He laughed, and the laugh was pleasant enough that it offended me. Good neighbors, he said, approving to nobody, then turned me a quarter turn like a man learning dance to face him. He leaned so close his hair oil entered my head. He let me see what his face wears when it doesn't think it will be photographed. It is not rage. It is not lust. It is a man inventorying broken boxes at the back of a store he does not want you to see. We'll finish later, he whispered, thrill-less, resigned, as if he'd been forced to put a project back on a shelf because the boss came in early. No, I said again, and he smiled because he likes a girl who believes she can edit his schedule. He walked backward off my porch, 1 inch at a time, so the light would witness he had left without me. He made eye contact, the way men on church committees do when they're about to deny funding and want you to call your own ugliness anger. He turned at the last step, the way basketball players pivot without traveling. And he moved down my walk with the calm of a person retrieving a pie from a friend's house after church. At the curb, he paused, looked left, then right, like a man who doesn't jaywalk. He palmed something small, no light, no metal, and slid it into his jacket pocket. Then he, polite as the start, vanished between my hedges in the better-lit street in a course that told me he had parked his car exactly where cameras wouldn't see it. 2 minutes later, maybe 5. It had the size of forever. The real police arrived with their sirens turned thoughtfully off, and their radios turned down like men in a library. They took notes, and my wrists shook. They looked at the cord and said Spanish windlass with admiration they couldn't hide, which made me respect them less than I had planned. They asked what he looked like, and I said, like every man in Wichita who remembers his part and shoots his cuffs before he parks at church. And they did their best to translate that into hair, height, age, weight. Did he say his name, one asked. He said code enforcement like an apology, I said. He said order like a hymn. He said projects like he writes them down to make them smaller when they get big. The younger officer glanced at his partner, the way you look at a man you have been partnered with on midnights long enough to read by his muscles. The partner shook his head, once small, never mind, and the younger one rode anyway. Anything else? He returned, I said, and the sentence had a shape I didn't want to describe. He'll come back. He likes tidy endings. We'll sit on the block tonight, the partner said, soothing, a blanket with a badge. We'll call Park City to see if a compliance officer was out. He wasn't, I said, not with faith, but with the kind of certainty that comes from watching a man who likes to invent credentials as foreplay. Latch that bathroom window, the younger one offered. Tomorrow in the daylight, you'll laugh at yourself for leaving it. I did not correct him. I did not tell him that window will be how I live one day, not how I die. I signed a form I didn't care to read, and the men with the badge-shaped plastic left my porch as if it had been their idea to come. Miss Elkins turned off her light like a curtain call. The church went back to welcoming sinners. I sat on my floor with my cat clawing the cord free because she believes everything that touches me is a toy. I thought about every man I had ever held a door for and wondered which of them likes to write about women in notebooks. I breathed. I found my phone and typed, "Father, forgive me, for I have screamed into a notes app." I slept with my head at the foot of my bed because I wanted my door to look different if it decided to come for me. He would come back. They do. I made coffee at dawn and watched the church camera practice not caring. I walked across the street barefoot and stood under the sign and waved at it, daring it to memorize me. I put the cord in a sandwich bag and wrote the date on it because I have learned how evidence likes to be fed. At 7:05, the kid got on the bus and didn't look at me because we teach children that women on sidewalks before breakfast are either nurses or trouble, and I am neither. At 8, my landlord called and said, "You okay?" And I said, "Define okay." When I left for work, a paper had been slid under my doormat. It was a copy of the Yard and Refuse Ordinance 8.12 with a circle around the subsection about containers must be tightly covered. Next to it, in blocky penmanship that hadn't unlearned junior high, a note, "You did good listening. I like your house. See you again when it's right." I didn't throw it away. Not yet. I kept it because I wanted to hold something I could show the world and say, here, this is what men look like when they want to feel like God and don't have a church that will let them. I told no one at work. I performed laminations and cut trifold brochures in obedient thirds and said next with a voice that made customers think I was both braver and less interesting than I am. When I lifted the heavy ream cartons, my wrists protested in parentheses. Somewhere after lunch, a man came in with a business card to copy, and the moment I saw the municipal seal, my body became a marble statue. Different man. Actual Park City. Paper thick as promises. He smelled like cigarettes and the failure of good schools. He smiled a nice dad smile and said hole punch without making it sound like an accusation. I watched him leave, and only then could I swallow. When I turned my key in the lock that evening, I did it with the seriousness of a person entering a courtroom. My house, insulted, pretended it had never been a room where a man treated it like a chapter he could put a bookmark in. I set a pan on the stove to boil noodles because cooking is a trick for keeping your hands in the present tense. I ate standing up because chairs pretend you are safe. I turned off every light that didn't need to be on, and I turned on the ones that made it harder to hide. I taped the bathroom window latch stupidly tight, but left the window itself ready to go. I tied a slip knot into a ribbon and wore it around my wrist under my cardigan because I wanted my body to remember that some knots still listen to you. I put my landlord's shovel by the front door inside and a hymn book by the back because being raised by Methodists makes you weird about what's weapon and what's word. I texted a picture of my cat to my mother and told her I loved her in the same breath as I said I couldn't talk. At 11, the phone rang and did the thing old phones do where they show unknown caller like it's my fault. I answered and let silence fill up. Because silence is a man's first attempt at taking something for free. I'm disappointed, the voice said. Not taped now, not polite, patient. You let police in, untidy. I let neighbors in, I said. They have lights. There was a little exhale that wanted to be a chuckle but had college and turned into a sigh. You're clever, he said. You shouldn't be living alone. I live in Kansas, I said. We all live alone. We live with rules, he corrected. Whose? I asked. Mine, he said. But he said it too fast, and I filed that away in the place where I file words that embarrass even the mouths that own them. He didn't hang up, because the phone is part of the ritual. He's a letter writer, a card slider, a documenter. He likes notes, and the way words sit still when he tells them to. He told me, in that voice men use when they wear ushers' jackets and clip nails on Saturdays, that he had neighbors too, that they appreciate a tidy fence and lids that hinge closed. That he has been elected to small things by small people who admire that he has the kind of face that can tell children to behave. I'm going to tell you something, I said, because women get to know when it's time to pick up the gavel. You think I am a project. You are a file. They will name it, and they will put boxes on the front. There will be a line where some woman like me will write alias, and if you use one again the way you did last night, the file will get thicker. There will be a little blank for notes, and a detective will write something he's not proud of, like neat. And he will underline it because he does not know how else to be angry. It will not keep you from coming back. The thing that will keep you from coming back is if the church camera gets you on the tape and you can't resist seeing yourself in your own movie. He breathed in, slow. I like you, he said. Smart girls tell better stories. I am not your story, I said evenly, because that sentence has a key inside it if you say it without shaking. But listen, if you come tonight, come early. I hung up. I put my phone in the bathroom sink and turned the faucet on low, so if it rang again, it would drown. I turned my TV to the Lutheran channel and let a sermon about stewardship make my living room look blurry and holy. I pulled the breaker that controlled my porch light and inverted the night, inside bright, outside dim. I put Miss Elkins's wooden spoon on my neighbor's fence where she would see and know to make noise. I unlatched the bathroom window. I sat on my front step with my cat on my knee like a prayer book. I waited where men hate women to wait, publicly. He did not come then. Neat men do not like to audition in front of audiences who did not buy tickets. But he came at 2, because 2 o'clock is for the pious and the guilty. I didn't hear the door. I heard the attic hatch settle, not a footstep, pressure. He had been here in the daylight testing my roofline, seeing that the duplex's two halves shared a crawl space above the hallway, where landlords push cable and mice alphabetize the insulation. He had planned the other door. I walked softly on my own carpet in white socks with the elastic tired. I stood under the hatch and listened. The house cannot lie. It is a wooden throat. It throat cleared once, and then his voice very close to the ceiling. We could finish it now. Or we could not, I said to my ceiling. You aren't ready. He laughed low. I'm always ready. I have lists. You haven't written the ending, I said. That's why you took back the slack and left. You didn't like that the church made you finish early. I stood on my tiptoes so the ceiling could hear me better. You want me to listen? You listen. You want order? I require a ritual. That's the rule. If you come into a house with your gloves in your pocket, you're not ready. If you come into a house without a list on the page after the one with my street, you're not ready. If you come into a house and the woman you want to control asks you to read to her and you can't, you're not ready. Silence, then small movement, the rope of a man's shoulder shifting because he is not as patient as his notebook teaches him to be. What? He asked, suspicious but curious, exactly where I needed him. Scripture, I said, and he sighed with relief because he knows church and thinks he owns it. Read me the one about a thief in the night, I said, because nothing humiliates a man more than hearing himself recited. He hesitated. Then the ceiling told me he nodded. He reached for his little notebook, and because he is a creature of habit, he reached for the page where he writes phrases that make him feel like a deacon. Paper rasped. The attic hatch trembled with the small arithmetic of a knee moving on plywood. While he found his verse, I pushed my bedroom dresser, an old oak thing with the dignity of grandmothers, into the hallway below the hatch. It squealed like a pig because wood screams when you make it help. He murmured the line, like a thief in the night, approving his own offense. I slid the dresser into place like blocking in a church pageant, then tugged my bathroom door open and twisted the tap to full and let steam declare baptism down the hall. The house now had 3 properties men like him hate: witness, water, and noise. He tried the hatch. It pressed. The dresser put its shoulder into the job of being a wall. He tried again, and the sound the wood made suggested a man negotiating with a hymn. I opened the bathroom window and let the air change church keys. A car passed slowly, the edge of night patrol the officer promised earlier, but had fallen in love with someone's coffee instead. The headlights made dim slats on my ceiling, like a reminder that the world does not technically belong to the man in the crawl space. Don't make me break something, he said through the plaster, annoyed, not angry. I told you I like tidy. I told you neat is not safe, I said, and the water in the sink laughed with me. Go home. The hatch pressed again. Hard now, enough to make a dusty outline appear on the sheetrock like fingerprints on a hymn book. He would either commit to untidy or he would postpone his project. Men like him do not like being told to pick. He picked later. The attic quieted with a slow exhale like the sigh of a choir when the hymn is over and they're no longer needing to stand. The weight lifted. My house remembered its own shape. He left efficiently. I heard the small footfall near the soffit, the crouch along joists, the exit at the far gable where the double has a vent that likes to gossip. He moved in the street like a man who just remembered he'd left his casserole dish in the church kitchen. He was pious all the way to his car. At 9 the next morning, Park City Compliance, real Park City, came to my porch with apology on his forehead. We're sorry, he said, hat in hand, the way men do when the words our badge was borrowed are a confession. We don't make midnight calls. I know, I said. He asked for a description, and I gave him what's worth more than hair color. He likes rules. He writes. He has a notebook with projects typed on it. He ties knots like they're scripture. He calls women ladies and means willing. The officer found that adjective with his tongue and rolled it to see if he could swallow it. You're not the first, he said quietly. We think you won't be the last. Unless you look in your cages, I said. Dog complaints. He'd volunteer for that. People who want to control women practice on animals until they think they're ready to graduate. He didn't contradict me. He took my bagged cord like a deacon collecting tithe. He promised to knock on Miss Elkin's door and tell her she had saved an entire undertaker's headache. He promised to tape my attic hatch. He promised. Men with badges have so many of those in their pockets. He left with more words than the night had given me. He didn't return to my house, not because he doesn't finish things, because he does. The world gave him other doors, kinder neighbors, places where the church camera was cheap and somebody put a fern in front of it because they thought plants make you look lived in. He finished his project in other rooms and other months. He tied neat bows and wrote neat dates and kissed his own trophies in Polaroids nobody deserved to be asked to look at. When the news came, the letters, the floppy disk that told on him like a choir boy, the word deacon said into microphones by a stunned pastor who will never again trust the way a man smiles while stacking chairs after a service, my phone lit up with grim heck. I told you texts from myself to myself. They said BTK on the screen in a font too cheerful and accompanied by logos that made ghoulish mouths with their O's. Bind. Torture. Kill. I said the words in my kitchen, alone, and then I put my hands on the counter and cried. Not because of what they meant. Women like me already know what they mean, but because the neat little letters looked like labels on a drawer system. They showed his face, and it looked like every usher who ever gently blocked an aisle with a hymn book while communion makes its careful math. They showed his house. Park City, tidy lawn, obedient shrubbery, and my rib cage turned into a laughing choir. He had been a compliance man. He had taken the leash and the meter reader's stubby pencil, and the city had thanked him because small power makes big men stand straighter. They showed the letters he wrote to himself in the newspapers by way of us, the way he named his projects like hurricanes in a lonely ocean. They read Otero and Bright and Fox and Wegerle and Davis and Hedge, and the way the anchor said the names made me hate all of us. You have to register them different in the mouth. You have to put the sirens in the vowels. They played the jailhouse interview that made the country think about the grammar of wickedness and whether correct usage can be used for ill. He spoke of projects and phases and plan of attack. He used phrases like, I observed, the way other men say, I felt. He giggled where a man should cry. He described a Spanish windlass like I hadn't felt one. He smiled when he spelled BTK out for the reporter like he thought she couldn't manage the alphabet herself. He wrote a floppy disk that gave him away because it wanted a blessing from a machine, and the machine, God bless it, confessed. It did the thing men do when they are tired. It told a church name and a first name and a brand. He had given sermons about politeness and order and obedience in pews where little boys will never again trust a word like deacon. My phone didn't stop. The younger officer texted, You were right with the little prayer hands emoji because we are all living in a stupid future. I said, I am still here. And he said, good. And that was the only decent conversation men had with me in that entire hour of triumph. I brought Miss Elkins over with muffins that were really bribes and said, look, and showed her the photo of his face. She made that sound old ladies make when keys drop. She put her hand over her chest like it was a door someone was trying to open. She said I saw him at Dillon's once in a voice that made saw carry 100 pounds more than it can carry without breaking. I took her hand in mine and we sat in my kitchen and let the cat thread us together like a seamstress. When they read his sentencing on the TV, 10 lives, a spreadsheet of forever, a judge who tried to be stern and only managed to be disgusted, I stood up. I did not clap. I did not pray. I had no ritual for justice this neat. I opened my bathroom window and let the house inhale it like spring. I took the ribbon from my wrist and tied it to the latch with a knot I can undo with one pull. I said the words bind, torture, kill backwards in my head because sometimes I am still a child and I think you can hex an ache by saying it undone. He is still alive. He is still writing long letters no one reads. He is, they say, being asked about other projects. Men like him are never done with their filing. He will die inside a place with a schedule that cannot be charmed. People will still say his 3 little letters into microphones when they want to look brave without having actually saved anyone. They will talk about floppy disks like God invented them to make priests feel better. They will ask, how could no one know? as if politeness weren't the most violent cover we ever agreed to. I will keep telling this the long way, because he made it long when he got good at pretending to be small. In the drawer by my stove live a handful of cup lids because my friend in Iowa taught me to carry them, and a pair of trauma shears because a woman in Indiana taught me that certain plastics only want the right angle. In the other drawer live ribbons, tied with knots I can name and undo, and a baggie with a cord that is the wrong testament to a better God. I moved out a year after. Not because of fear, because of neatness. I know what it wanted from me, and I refuse to be tidy about the way I survived. I leave cups on tables. I let my bed be wrong. I paint one wall a color the landlord calls too much, and then I remind him that too much is what we say when we mean alive. I keep 2 chains on my door and a door wedge under the mat. I learn to be rude at thresholds. I answer questions with no, and wait for men to learn what to do with a woman who doesn't decorate her sentence for them. Sometimes I dream of the attic hatch and the wait there. In the dream, the hatch opens, and my father is up there with his coil of rope teaching me a knot. He shows me how you can take a loop that God did not intend and pull the right tail and make it bless you instead of take you. I wake up and tie one, then untie it, and then I go downstairs and open every window because I own air now. I am fine, by which I mean I am loud and I am not apologizing. How am I doing now? Well, I keep 2 chains on my door, I practice rude at thresholds, and I only tie knots I can undo with one pull. Killer reveal. Dennis Rader, a.k.a. BTK, Bind, Torture, Kill. Dennis Lynn Rader, born 1945, terrorized the Wichita, Greater Park City, Kansas area from 1974 to 1991, murdering 10 people across 7 crime scenes. A self-styled projects planner, he stalked and bound victims in their homes, often using intricate knots, and left taunting communications for media and police signed BTK. Rader worked for years as a security installer, ADT, and later as Park City's compliance animal control officer and a church council president, cultivating a neat, rule-keeping persona. In 2004-2005, after resurfacing in communications, he mailed a floppy disk. Forensic metadata tied it to his church and home computer, leading to his arrest in February 2005. He pled guilty in June 2005 and received 10 consecutive life sentences. Rader remains incarcerated at the El Dorado Correctional Facility. Investigators have probed possible connections to other cases. But the 10 known murders define his confirmed crimes and his calculated fixation on control, order, and self-documentation.